Imagine a tiny 21-mile stretch of water holding the entire global economy hostage. It sounds like the plot of a geopolitical thriller, right? But right now, it is our daily reality. We are watching the world's most critical energy artery get squeezed, and the ripples are hitting everyone, from Wall Street traders to the average person just trying to fill up their gas tank.
It really is the ultimate geographical Achilles heel, and the tension around it has reached an absolute boiling point. We are looking at a situation where global markets are panicking, supply chains are fracturing, and the military stakes have never been higher.
Exactly. And that brings us right to the elephant in the room. April 1st, prime time from the Oval Office. We are over a month into what is being called Operation Epic Fury, and the president just delivered his first major national address on the conflict. The tone was, to put it mildly, incredibly triumphant.
Triumphant is the perfect word for it. The rhetoric was heavy on superlatives. We heard declarations that the enemy's navy is completely gone, that their air force is in absolute ruins, and that their top military command has been decimated. The core message was designed to project overwhelming strength, framing the campaign as a series of unprecedented historical victories.
But there was a fascinating paradox in that speech, wasn't there? On one hand, the message is that the core strategic objectives are nearing completion, that the threat is practically neutralized. But in the very next breath, we are told to brace for another 2 to 3 weeks of extremely heavy strikes to, quote, bring them back to the Stone Ages. How do we reconcile those two things?
That is the tightrope of wartime communication. You have to assure the public that their incredible sacrifice, and we should note, the address solemnly recognized the American service members who have lost their lives, is yielding tangible results. But you also have to prepare them for the reality that modern warfare doesn't just switch off overnight. The justification for extending the strikes is rooted heavily in the nuclear argument. The administration is leaning hard into the narrative that this isn't just about retaliation. It's about permanently dismantling a nuclear shield that could terrorize the region for decades.
And they certainly went through the historical laundry list to back that up. Pulling out of the 2015 deal, the previous targeted strikes, the long history of proxy warfare. It was essentially a comprehensive case for why this extreme level of force is the only remaining option. But let's pivot from the sky to the sea, because this is where the story gets really complicated. The president is celebrating these massive military wins, yet everyday citizens are furious about the skyrocketing price of gasoline.
Which is the immediate, visceral way the public experiences global conflict. You can show satellite images of destroyed weapons factories all day long, but the average citizen feels the war at the pump. And this is where that 21-mile stretch of water comes back into play. The Strait of Hormuz is essentially the jugular vein of the global energy market. In a normal year, you have roughly 20 million barrels of crude oil and petroleum products flowing through there every single day.
20 million barrels. That is a staggering number to even visualize.
It equates to about 20% of all global petroleum consumption, 1/5 of the world's oil, and roughly 1/5 of the world's liquefied natural gas, squeezing through a channel so narrow you could run a marathon across it in a couple of hours.
And right now, that channel is basically a ghost town, isn't it?
Completely. Commercial traffic has plummeted by over 90%. Before this conflict, you had over 100 tankers transiting daily. Now, you have a mere handful. The waters are contested with mines, drone swarms, and asymmetric naval tactics. The massive conventional military superiority of the United States can wipe out an air force, but clearing a narrow, heavily mined waterway of cheap, asymmetric threats is an incredibly slow and dangerous process.
Which leads to a really profound geopolitical shift that we saw in the speech. The United States is now a net oil exporter. We actually don't rely heavily on the oil flowing through that specific strait anymore. But the countries that do mostly in Asia, taking about 80% of that flow, are watching their economies shudder. And the president's message to them, and to NATO allies, was brutally blunt.
It was a defining moment of transactional foreign policy. The message was essentially, if you want the oil, go secure the boats yourselves. Calling allies paper tigers and telling them to build up some courage is a radical departure from the post-World War II consensus. For decades, the implicit global deal was that the U.S. Navy acted as the ultimate guarantor of free trade on the high seas.
Right, America was the global beat cop.
Exactly. And now the beat cop is saying, I'm not patrolling your neighborhood for free anymore. The administration is explicitly telling these nations to either step up militarily and risk their own fleets, or simply start buying American oil. It's a brilliant, albeit ruthless, economic pivot. It forces the world to internalize the true cost of global security.
It is absolutely wild to think about. It feels like we are witnessing the end of an era. But it also raises a philosophical question about the nature of power. If a superpower decides to only protect its own immediate interests, does it inadvertently invite chaos? Because even if the U.S. doesn't need that specific oil, the global price spikes still cause domestic inflation. We can't entirely build a fortress around our economy.
You hit the nail on the head. That is the illusion of total independence in a globalized world. The oil market is a single massive pool. If you drain 20% of it from one side, the water level drops everywhere. So while the U.S. might be energy independent on paper, the financial contagion of a closed choke point infects everything from shipping insurance to the cost of groceries in the Midwest.
So, looking at the timeline, we were given 2 to 3 more weeks of intense military pressure. Let's say the administration achieves exactly what it wants. The enemy is bombed back to the Stone Ages. The nuclear threat is erased. What does the day after look like? How do you reopen a critical waterway in a region that has just been completely destabilized?
That is the multi-trillion-dollar question. And noticeably, it was the one thing missing from the address. There was no clear outline of an exit strategy or a rebuilding phase. Winning a war of destruction is one thing. Winning the peace and restoring global commerce is entirely different. You can't force shipping conglomerates to send billion-dollar tankers into a strait if the insurance companies refuse to cover them. The physical war might end in 3 weeks, but the economic war, the psychological fear of navigating those waters, could last for years.
It really makes you wonder about the true cost of victory. We measure success in destroyed bunkers and neutralized threats, but the collateral damage is a fractured global system. We are essentially watching a high-stakes game of poker where the chips are the world's energy supply, and the administration is confident they hold all the cards.
They might hold the cards, but the table they are playing on is incredibly fragile. History shows us that when you push a region to the absolute brink, the consequences rarely stay confined to a neat, predictable timeline. The immediate military objectives might be met, but the geopolitical shockwaves, the shifting of alliances, the weaponization of trade routes, the realization by other nations that they are entirely on their own, that will redefine the next century.
It is a sobering reality. We started by talking about a 21-mile stretch of water, and we end up looking at the fragile threads holding our entire modern world together. As we watch these next few weeks unfold, the real suspense isn't just about whether the military campaign succeeds. It's about what kind of world emerges from the smoke when the final strike is called. Will the global arteries reopen, or are we entering an era where every nation must fend for itself in the dark?
That is exactly the question we all need to be asking. Because the dust may settle soon, but the landscape it reveals will be completely unrecognizable.
A profound thought to leave on. The coming weeks will undoubtedly shape the future of global power, energy, and security. We will be right here to unpack every moment of it as the reality of Operation Epic Fury continues to unfold.